All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Live. Yeah, that's where we are, kids. All the way. Did we make it, Tony? Seemed like maybe the takeoff was a little bit...
a little shaky. Sorry about that.
A little shaky, yeah. I'm just saying.
Thanks, Tony. Add you guys to the stage. Sorry about that.
I would like to thank a great woman named Ginny Thomas.
Yeah, how about that Ginny Thomas? Maybe she was... We don't hear a lot about her these days, but she's still there lurking. Kim is here.
Kim, how are you?
We do hear a lot about Kim these days, which is always welcome. What a show we've got. We're live on YouTube. This is the platform we come on live with daily. 2 to 4 o'clock in the East, 11 to 1 in the West. And then what would it be in the Central Time Zone? I ask you about the Central Time Zone. Tony, what would it be in the Central Time Zone?
Thanks, Tony.
What? I'm queuing a video, sorry.
You weren't listening? What would it be in the Central Time Zone, Kim?
Central Time Zone is 1 hour ahead.
Oh, wow, this is embarrassing,
right?
everybody.
I don't know.
It's incredible.
Are you not aware that the whole universe...
American? That's a big part of the country. Oh, my Lord.
The universe centers around California.
3. God damn it. What the
I
hell
said it was
going...
1 hour. I said it was 1 hour ahead. I was right.
I want to apologize to everyone in the Central Time Zone on behalf of Kim. In fact, yeah. I'm
the only one who got it right.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
I think you were on to something.
I stand corrected.
Okay. Anyway.
The question is, what time is it in Hawaii?
What time is it in Hawaii? You know the answer to that because you're Hawaiian.
I'm not Hawaiian, but
I thought you were Hawaiian.
I sometimes forget what they do, but I think it's 3 hours earlier there. It's 3 hours earlier.
3 hours earlier. So
3 hours Hawaii, yeah.
What time would that be, Kim, then, right now as we speak?
8.
Thank you.
And aloha, Karen.
Aloha, everybody.
Yeah.
I like to get everybody agitated early. We've got a lot of stuff.
God, you do.
Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes.
I know there was going
Donald
to be a pop
Trump
quiz.
says no to 60 Minutes. I didn't think it would be considered a pop quiz. Like, what time is it? My God. But
time zones. Is this the new trivia show? Time zones around the world?
Central Time Zone is 2 hours ahead. Wait a minute. Is it? All right. I thought it was just an hour. It's Mountain Time Zone is so we. What time is it, Tony, in Chicago right now? Why don't you check?
He's checking.
This is unbelievable. I want to apologize again. Let me tell you that we've got a great show. Don't go by this, okay? The first few minutes, don't go by this if you're new here. Yeah. We have a lot of really great stuff here. First of all, I've got a couple of new. It's 1:07 p.m. What time did we say it was? Noon?
Noon. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's 2 hours ahead.
We all stand corrected.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
I would like to.
You cannot say you love your country.
Yes, you're right. There are 4 time zones. Stan Pollock, CPA.
Yeah.
Pacific, Mountain, Central, and Eastern. So the Mountain Time Zone, it's 12:07. Now it's 1:07 in Chicago. What's that, Tony?
Oh, because they're still in daylight savings time, I think is what that is, right?
Oh.
Thanks, Tony. That's till next week, 2 weeks? And then it's all
but that doesn't change the fact that there are 4 time zones, right?
Unless you're in Arizona.
Right. They don't subscribe to that. But, I mean, that we all let that get into the outfield on us, so just trying to...
Do we need one of those little clocks in the corner of the screen? You know, where they have, like, in different parts around the world? Like, here it is, yeah.
Apparently we do.
Newsroom clocks?
Apparently we do, because none of us can keep track of it.
My words upset so many people.
We upset so many people.
Why don't we just not talk about the time?
Well,
like, just
we're not
avoid all mention of time.
Okay. First hour is filled with stuff related to the Kamala Harris 60 Minutes sit-down. Mark, you need the multiple clocks. Maybe, Patreon and PayPal. Also, Hawaii does not have daylight savings time,
Yeah, that's true.
saving time, as I think it.
Agreed.
Anything east of the Rockies is not relevant, says Tim.
That's
How
right.
dare you? That
Exactly.
is outrageous.
You cannot say you love your country.
No, I think that may be the best part. I apologize to, gosh, you guys are unbelievable. Really incredible. It's true what they say about you guys in California. You know, you just think everything's all about you.
Yeah, the sun rises and sets in California.
Another Mark Thompson time waster. It is true. This does feel.
This is a classic Mark Thompson time waster.
It feels time wasty, but we are getting some business done. Look, we're educating ourselves and others. Time is relative, said Jim. Thank you. Please have another hit, Jim.
Where are my weed smokers at?
You know, time is relative, dude. I mean, did you ever think about that? No, haven't really thought about it. Celebrating 6-month anniversary of my triple bypass surgery.
Oh.
Listening to your show at night after visiting hours made me feel happy. I'm an OG KGO listener. The show is way better. This show is way better. Tess Downey, triple bypass. First of all, that's so... I can't imagine the anxiety you feel being wheeled into the OR for a triple bypass. And to think that we had any kind of positive effect on her recovery.
Yeah.
Listening to your show at night after visiting hours made me feel happy. Wow. I mean, I think that I almost get emotional thinking about that quite seriously. And I don't like to be quite serious. So you pushed me to the limits of my hosting. Tess Downey, thank you for a $60 donation to this show by way of Super Chat, and congratulations on a success. I'm not going to cry! I'm not going to cry! Yeah, I mean, it really is that level of emotion. 6-month anniversary of a triple bypass surgery. Wow. Now, once you've had that, you've got to be feeling so much better, you know, because those arteries aren't. Isn't that right, Kim?
It takes a while to recover. And also something because my husband had a heart surgery a while back. And what was interesting to me is that something about the chemicals released in your body, most people suffer depression a few months after the surgery. It's very normal. So if that happened to you, just know that people go through that all the time. But it's a long recovery process, and she's probably still getting back to normal. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, Tess, I hope you're not depressed. You don't seem depressed by this text. But all of us are on the verge of depression if we lose this election. Am I right, folks? Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm just saying this is, we are teetering, all of us. So, but that is super great, and thank you very much for that generous offering and for your story, which I think is quite moving. So really, really cool. An OG KGO listener.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Lori is jumping in early here to say, just another Tuesday. Tomorrow, please ask John Rothman about ranked choice voting and how to strategize your vote, specifically the SF Mayor Supervisor School District votes. Thanks. Hope the cash is an incentive. It is, as you know. I scrounge around looking for donations. So Lori Dolly with a $25 donation to the show, and with that question. So it would be Kim, because Tony won't be here. Kim, will you, as they say, put a pin in that? Will you put it off to the side and make sure we ask John Rothman?
Yeah, I will. Okay.
So Kim, you are the person who's responsible for getting this question in tomorrow.
Kim, how are you?
Okay.
It always falls upon me.
Well, what's the big deal? I mean, if you can't do it, just tell me. I don't think I
I'll
can do it.
I
don't
can't
think I
copy
can
and paste.
include.
I have to take a picture
can't
of the screen.
remember to include that simple question for Lori. I can't do it. That's all you have to say, and then I will do it.
I will do it. I'll take a
right.
picture of it right now.
All right. Very good. Lori, that's what it takes. We have to take a picture of the screen to remember. Nancy Boyd, thank you for a big
shout out.
$20 super sticker. Thank you. Wow, the show is not starting the way I thought it would, but I appreciate it. Spencer Jaffe, always in early with some kind of a note and some support. It's time to vote. I already mailed my vote. Of course, it's easier since I've known how I was going to vote for 6 months. Now I just got to wait. Get rid of Gascon, LA people. Yeah. Now, Kim, I asked you to set up the interview with Gascon's opponent. Have you done it yet?
I have not done it yet.
Oh, very good. Well, there you go. That's the kind of quick follow-up that we have on this show.
It's been 24 hours. I
was just about to say, but Jesus. I only told her about it yesterday. So, for the Mark Thompson Show Healing Channel to Tess from another OG, Scott Rittenberg.
Nice.
Thank you, Scott, for a $20 super chat and for jumping in early with support for Tess. And those who get any comfort from this show, again, I'm astounded and amazed that our show with its periodic acrimony could provide you any emotional support or good feeling, but I love that it does. I was back teaching 4 classes of Aquafit within 2 months, Tess says. I was bored and determined to get back. Please don't smoke cigarettes. That's why my arteries were clogged.
Yikes.
Wow.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. Back teaching Aquafit, that's wonderful.
That is amazing. Yeah. God, that Aquafit, I would love to do it. I'd love to do a lot of things. I'm not a big gym guy. Now I'm really in the gym a little bit every day because I'm scared of anybody. Dying is the word I was looking for, yes. But I know I have mad respect for you CrossFitters, Aquafitters, however you do it. It's super cool. Tess, thank you so much. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, as I was saying, we have a lot going. You're right. Yeah, it's thank you so much. I should have said thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Tess is magical. Between Mark Thompson and Jimmy Kimmel, I'm good, says Cheryl. Wow, that's high praise. I love my Jimmy. Edward Lee, F the news. Super chats for 2 hours. Balling on a budget. Edward had a comment yesterday, and I made a note that I wanted to follow up on it. And now I don't remember what the comment was, but it was something controversial, Edward. If you think of it again today, please post it, and I will comment on it. But there is a major hurricane, now a second hurricane, bearing down on the U.S. It will likely make landfall Wednesday. And even as I say this, I should tell you, I'll get to all the politics. I'll get to Kamala Harris. I've got highlights from 60 Minutes. I've got thoughts about that interview. We will talk with David Cay Johnston in the second hour, so you will not miss out on anything political. But this hurricane has been turned political as well. Hurricane relief, with whole cloth lies being offered about how the federal government isn't there with money. They're not there with help. They've been, this is irresponsible in the extreme. It's dangerous. But we'll put that to the side for a moment. I do have comments from Mayorkas in a second. I wanted to mention just the current state of things. This is an immense weather system. Did you see, Tony? I know this isn't the thing you've got queued up, but
all right.
All right, Tony says, but what is it? The meteorologist, I thought I sent this to you, but maybe I didn't. The meteorologist who became emotional when he talked about the pressure drop, the sudden pressure drop, he's like an OG meteorologist. It's getting around. It's getting a lot of viral play, but whether or not we get it for you, it just speaks to, it was just a moment as this guy is sort of updating live what was happening. And he talked about a drop in pressure at the center of this hurricane of the sort in the last 12-hour period that he was looking at that he'd never seen before. And it spoke to the power and intensity of the hurricane. Meantime, this is the current position. Tony's got the guy who can update us just on the basic path and the wide swath of real estate that will be affected by this Hurricane Milton. Go ahead.
Powerful hurricane this morning, still maximum winds of 155 miles per hour. Expected to be a powerful major hurricane all the way up through landfall in Florida. And the size of the storm in terms of its tropical storm and hurricane force winds is really going to grow. And in fact, it's going to more likely double in size between now and late tomorrow night, early Thursday when it reaches the Florida coast. And you can see from here, we have tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings in effect for almost the entire state of Florida. This area in red is under a hurricane warning that includes places like like Fort Myers, Charlotte, Port Charlotte, Sarasota, Tampa, up to Cedar Key, and also inland into places like Orlando, Ocala, and we're likely to see those hurricane warnings issued farther east over to the east coast of Florida later today. Very concerned about the storm surge potential. We have that storm surge warning in effect for much of the Florida west coast, all the way up from north of Tampa through the Tampa Bay region, all the way down to Flamingo, including, and we're expecting life-threatening storm surge inundation in this area. We're very concerned about this region right centered around the Tampa Bay area, from Clearwater through Tampa, St. Petersburg, Manatee County, Sarasota County. In here, we're expecting to see 10 to 15 feet of inundation above ground level, where you see this purple shading here, somewhere in that area. And that's life-threatening inundation. You know, I'm 6 feet tall. That's water 2 to 2.5 times above my head. So folks are being asked to evacuate from these areas by local officials. If you have been asked to evacuate and you live in one of those evacuation zones, please try to get out today if you can.
Okay,
it
that's
appears
great
at this
stuff.
point,
And that is he works at the Hurricane Center. If he's not the head of the Hurricane Center, I don't know. I couldn't catch it, but he is, I believe, the lead meteorologist on this. So you've got the intensity of the hurricane, which is manifest, which is obvious, right? And then you have this on the heels of another hurricane with devastating consequences for much of the southeastern U.S., and that is a recovery effort. It's a cleanup effort. It's a real steep hill to climb for the federal government, which has provided a lot of aid already. In fact, now I'd like to get to that. Didn't I send you a mashup, Tony, about... I sent you a couple of things. The Mayorkas, let's run Mayorkas first. Sorry about that. Run Mayorkas, who just appeared, and he wasn't bad on MS. It was really the last thing I sent you, please, Tony. If you could run that. And we'll just run a second to speak to the federal relief effort. Here is Mayorkas talking about the...
We can meet the needs of Hurricane Helene survivors and the individuals who will be in need as a result of the devastating Hurricane Milton. That is what FEMA does. It does it in support of state and local officials. And we have been directed by President Biden, by Vice President Harris, to not only dedicate the FEMA resources, the resources of the Department of Homeland Security, but the resources of the entire federal government. And that is indeed what we are doing. When we take a look at the height of Hurricane Helene, there were 5.1 million people without power. That number has been reduced by 4.8 million. At the height of Hurricane Helene, there were approximately 3.4 million people without communication. That number has been reduced by approximately 3.1 million. We have tens of millions of liters of water and food and commodities available in anticipation of Hurricane Milton. This is what the brave men and women of FEMA and all of the brave men and women in an emergency response do for a living. They dedicate themselves to the well-being of others. We have the resources to meet the demand.
Yeah, that's really, and now there are a bunch of other questions associated with funding, FEMA funding, et cetera. But, you know, FEMA's operating under a continuing resolution right now. They're not going to run out of money. There's not this idea somehow that they're going to run out of money is ridiculous. Now, I would say, given the fact that you're looking at climate change and the superstorms, you are going to have to allocate more money to FEMA in the future. So there will have to be a congressional, you know, Congress is gone through, they don't come back till January. I mean, Congress, it's insane how they came back for, I think, a week or 10 days, and then now they're on a break until January. But when they get back, they will have to reallocate money for FEMA. I mean, again, you can't just keep borrowing under continuing resolution. You have to build that budget because of the kind of threat that this country is facing in this new world that has been the result of climate change. So the other side of this is that you'll probably need some additional personnel there in parts of Florida because you are dealing with the aftermath of Helene and now the aftermath of what will be the aftermath of Milton. So all that stuff has to happen, and it has to happen quickly. If you talk to people in the federal government, they will tell you, and you talk to people around Washington, FEMA is one of the agencies that works really well. So the idea that you could smear them, that they didn't show up, that they didn't have enough money, this is obscene because they're real people on the ground. It's a life and death situation, and they need the government to show up, and the government is showing up. This is a particularly challenging situation in mountain communities of North Carolina, et cetera. So these are tough to reach areas, yet the government is getting to a lot of those areas. I'm sure in some of these mountain communities it's harder, but the idea somehow that they're not showing up, I mean, that really is an insult to all the people who are public servants and who have dedicated their lives to just these kinds of emergency situations. Kim,
Plus,
go ahead.
it's really dangerous as well because you have people that are probably Trumpers in these red states that hear Trump say they're not there for you, there's no money for you. And that keeps people from applying for help and reaching out for the assistance that they could really use right now. So it's not fair to the people that he's lying to either. I have to tell you, Wes has come in with a super sticker saying, sorry I got here late, but I have a tardy slip. Indeed, he does. He lives in the affected zone where people are trying to get out right now in Florida. This is very scary.
Tampa's an area that any of the older boys and girls know was sort of a growing city that was was not a huge community decades ago, but in our lifetime, we've seen Tampa and the Tampa metropolitan area grow immensely. There are a lot of people who live there. They are evacuating. Wes, I presume, not knowing exactly where you are, that you may be among the evacuees. We obviously are thinking of you all down in Florida. And this is a weird word to use, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's a luxury that we have of some time that you have to evacuate. You know, I had to evacuate twice from fire. And when you evacuate from fire, you have no time. You got to get out. We literally could see the flames coming up the hill. There's no time to gather everything and all the, things that they tell you, medicines, pictures, important documents. You grab what you can because you have in your mind rehearsed some things, but you have to leave right away. Flood is the same thing. The one thing that hurricanes have that benefits us is they have slow relative movement that allows us now, with technology giving us all these prognostications, with technology giving us several days often before we have to actually deal with it making landfall. Now, I understand the path can change over those few days, et cetera, but the point I'm trying to make is I was impressed that a lot of Florida evacuees were getting out, it seemed, in an orderly fashion. There is a panic when you're evacuating around a fire. I can tell you that, and from firsthand experience again, and the same with flood. And that's how people get caught on roads and awful things happen. Talk to the people in Paradise, California. So I'm very much with you, Wes, and everybody in Florida, and I'm hoping that you take these hours that we do have, this grace period, if you want to think of it that way, and then you get out. I saw something from Dan Rather that I really like. I get this newsletter from Dan Rather. Remember the anchor man?
Yeah.
So he writes some good stuff occasionally. And on the disinformation about FEMA that is being spread by Trump and the MAGA movement, he makes a point. It's a long post, so I'll just kind of read you part of it. The claims that money's being taken out of the FEMA budget and directed to immigrants and so that they can stay in hotels or whatever it might be, that they don't have any money, that the government hasn't shown up yet, that Biden hasn't called, all of this stuff that Trump's claims are so absurd and disgusting, Rather says, it is hard to imagine anyone would believe them. But just because they're objectively outrageous doesn't mean he shouldn't be called out. Many have said this more than once. We have repeatedly written it. But the lies and disinformation too often get ignored or downplayed. Facts are too often shoved aside with the excuse that they are, quote, old news. But attention should be paid each and every time, and especially now. Trump said that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have stolen $1 billion from FEMA and are spending it on housing for, quote, illegal immigrants. Illegal migrants, actually. Perhaps he got this idea for this abject bunk from his own time in office when his administration moved $155 million from FEMA to pay for migrant detention centers. We talked about that the other day here. These lies that he comes up about Biden are actually things that he did.
Yeah.
He decided where money should go based on blue state, red state, who supported me, who didn't. Trump lied when he said Biden was refusing to help people in Republican areas and would not take calls from Republican governors in hard-hit states. You know who proved him wrong? The Republican governors in hard-hit states. These guys aren't usually cheerleaders for the Biden administration. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin said he is, quote, incredibly appreciative of the rapid response. Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia told reporters that he spoke with the president. Quote, Biden just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, you know, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there are other things we need, to call him directly. If you think this all sounds bad, it will be worse if Trump is returned to the White House, Rather says. Fast forward to next hurricane season and Project 2025. The far-right blueprint for the next Republican administration would, and this is super important, and it's a point I've made over and over, but I feel like Rather makes it better than I do. The blueprint for the next Republican administration through Project 2025 would gut FEMA, including eliminating flood insurance. Governors would have to come up with most of the disaster relief money from their own state coffers. Project 2025 would also disband the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, agencies responsible for predicting storms and providing forecasts. That weather app on your phone and the meteorologist on your local news, neither would be able to provide complete weather forecasts, which they get from the National Weather Service. That's if Project 2025 is realized. And it goes on. The entire federal websites, as you'll remember, under Trump, were scrubbed of any reference to climate change. It is a front and center agenda item to get rid of these agencies that are associated with helping during these kinds of colossal disasters. I think it's worth noting along the way here, as Trump plays politics with this, as he makes up these stories, that this is a real unfolding tragedy in the Southeast with another major weather system moving in, and that you could exploit it for political gain is loathsome in itself, but that you could actually have a plan that would get rid of the federal agencies that would provide disaster relief, that's even more loathsome and more grotesque. And that is the Trump agenda. So, look, I get it. I'm partisan. I'm not a Trump fan. I think Trump is a cheap con man grifter, and I can't believe that he's gotten as far as he's gotten. He actually ascended to the presidency once. It's an amazing fact. But I think he's surrounded now by people who are well-versed in how to dismantle the government. And the government is what you need in situations like this. Even those who want to pare back the federal government to its bare bones have to, I think, admit that when it comes to disaster relief and handling these sorts of situations, this is when you need government. When you need to prosecute some kind of military confrontation, that's when you need government. I think you need government in a lot of other ways, and the government can operate very well in many other ways. But certainly this is a way in which government is so very, very important. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is not the end of it, though. I did want to mention, Tony, what else did I give you related to the, I had the governor's mashup. What else did I give you, Tony? I've got a lot of stuff in your magic. Is Tony still with us? No?
I think so.
Yeah.
No. What else did I give you,
Weatherman
pal?
getting emotional. I found that. about
what was
the
that?
hurricane.
Oh, you did find him.
Let's see it.
Oh, may as well see it. Yeah, I mentioned it. Okay, here it is. This is the guy getting emotional. This is a
incredible hurricane. It has dropped. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour. And
okay, now that was it. That he just gets choked up. The reason that the drop in pressure is important, as you know, is it relates to wind velocity. So so the intensity of the weather system is essentially directly proportionate to the pressure reading. Brian says, thank you for an $18 super chat. I wanted to thank you so much for your words to commemorate the one-year anniversary of the horrendous terrorist attack into Israel by Hamas. Bless you, Mark. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Brian, for noticing that. That was yesterday, and that's an ongoing, unfolding tragedy as well, what's happening in the Middle East, with no real sufficient resolutions, as you know. So spicy this morning. I love it, says Tumbleweed, with a super chat for $17. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. We're a crowd-funded show, so appreciate super chats and super stickers and that kind of thing. Really does help keep us afloat. It's a weird world we live in where we have to ask you to help us. We really do appreciate it. So that's a bit on the hurricane. Kamala Harris sat down with 60 Minutes. By the way, President Biden postponed his trip to Germany to be here for not only the aftermath of Helene, but also the incoming Hurricane Milton. And so and I'll just mention this in relation to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is in this weird place because she doesn't really do anything related to the hurricane. I mean, let's be honest about it. And yet, because she's running for president, she has to at least appear, and this is the stuff that Trump is so good at, I think it's very one-dimensional and paper thin, but I mean, I guess he's good at it from the standpoint of always making a show. He's a showman, so he always figures out what will look good. Let me surround myself with people who are, in this case, it would be relief workers. In the case of a military showing, it would be guys with a lot of medals and, who are tall like I am. Remember, he is famous for having to have asked that people in wheelchairs and veterans who, were now handicapped as a result of war injuries not be placed in the front row because it didn't look good. I mean, it's an insane fact that that's his world. So Kamala Harris is thrust into this position where she has to do things that have the appearance of her being engaged in this hurricane effort. But at the same time, let's be honest, she'd rather be out there in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, doing the real work and heavy lifting associated with the last month of an election. But she can't do that given the fact that now you have another major deadly weather system that's bearing down on Florida. So she has to click back on that and go back to Washington. Again, how that all settles out is sort of, it's a media calculation she'll have to make, but it's associated with that, which is, I've got to get back to Washington because it looks bad if I'm in these other places. Trump does a lot of stuff that looks bad also, I should just say, and yet somehow nothing sticks to him because I think baked into the Trump image, there is an understanding that he does things that look bad and that he says things that are inappropriate, and that's just Trump being Trump. So he gets a total pass on the things that they hold Biden and they hold Kamala Harris to. And so on the 60 Minutes thing, I was just going to mention, as I watch 60 Minutes, and this is a point I've made to you I want to say in the last week or so, but I think it's worth keeping in mind. This demand to sit down with legacy media, with mainstream media, do a real interview with an interviewer who's really going to ask tough questions. This is the constant refrain in relation to Kamala Harris. I find it to be laughable on some level because Trump is never doing that stuff. He blanched from the notion of going and actually sitting down with 60 Minutes. He'd said he was going to do it, and then he didn't. Where does he show up? All you hear about on his stump is, I sit down for interviews all the time. She won't do any of them. Dude, you sit down for interviews all the time with Sean Hannity and what's her name? The woman at night, Laura something, Ingram. Yeah, I mean, those are the people you said with Jesse Waters. You sit down for an interview, okay?
Didn't he walked out of a Leslie Stahl interview at 60 Minutes?
That was in 2020. That's right, when she got it all tough on him.
Yeah.
And now he's saying, until I get an apology for how I was treated by 60 Minutes, there are all these sort of shifting reasons that he didn't do 60 Minutes. We'll play you a little bit of what 60 Minutes said about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Here's the problem with 60 Minutes for Trump. And we saw it last night with the interview with 60 Minutes that Vice President Harris did. They hold your feet to the fire. If they ask you a question and you don't answer it, they circle back around and they say, you didn't answer the question. And they'll do it until you answer the question. It's serious. And so he can't handle that. He can't handle anyone being tough with him. He wants people to throw rose petals at his feet. He doesn't want to answer the real tough questions. He can't do it.
Yeah,
so of course he's not
exactly
going.
Right. That's exactly right. So here is Kamala Harris. She did sit down with 60 Minutes, and they did hold her feet to the fire a bit. Go ahead, Tony.
That the American economy is doing very well, better than most countries, I think. But the American people don't seem to be feeling it. Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Harris says she'll press Congress to pass a federal ban on price gouging for food and groceries, but details are yet to be defined.
You want to expand?
How annoying.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, how annoying that he has to talk over her like that.
Well, this is the thing, and I'll make a general point now about the way that interviews are packaged. When you sit down for 60 Minutes interview or with even a local news interview, whatever it might be, any kind of network interview where it's taped and recorded, they will call the sit down for those pieces that they want, and then they will add track, as it's called, right? The voiceover that sort of summarizes whatever the person's saying. The problem with that is that oftentimes you as the interviewee can say things more effectively and perhaps more accurately than the summary or the track would suggest. And this is kind of what you're saying, Kim, that, hey, let her fill it out. You can see the unedited interview typically, even with 60 Minutes. They usually post it sometime later on their CBS website or on the 60, or even on YouTube. It'll show up on their channel. But in this case, they have 15 minutes for the interview or 20 minutes for the interview, and so they need to summarize, and that's the way they do it. So if you said, and a lot of people do this, I've been part of these negotiations before, I'll only be part of an interview if it's live.
Yeah.
Many people say that. Many politicians say that. Many high-profile luminaries of all sort say, if you'll interview me live, I'll do the interview. But I won't sit down for an interview that will be edited. And one of the reasons is that to which you've referred, Kim. I
just think people are watching it because they want to hear her words and her answers. They don't want to hear that 60 Minutes summarize her answers, because we can get that from any news channel. What a news story of the day. We're tuning in, we're watching it because we want to hear her words, not his words.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Luminaries is a ding word. That is, I suppose that's true. Yeah. The other part of the interview, does it go on, Tony, or there was a part at the end? Go ahead.
America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
But pardon me, Madam Vice President, the question was, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, one of the things is I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations. And I plan on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about. Their constituents are those firefighters and teachers and nurses. Their constituents are middle-class, hardworking folk.
And Congress has shown no inclination to move in your direction.
I disagree with you. There are plenty of leaders in Congress who understand and know that the Trump tax cuts blew up our federal deficit. None of us, and certainly I cannot afford to be myopic in terms of how I think about strengthening America's economy. Let me tell you something. I am a devout public servant, you know that. I am also a capitalist. And I know the limitations of government.
Come on.
So there you go. I thought that, you know, under the circumstances, again, you can sit here in an armchair quarterback that. I thought she was generally okay on that. You know, I don't think some of these sit-downs are, you know, hugely her strength, but I don't think she did badly with that.
No.
There is an immigration cut that will play you a little bit later if there's time. And, you know, again, she's asked to comment on how would you solve these intractable issues. How would you know, so the immigration problem, you know, it's a worldwide issue and every country is struggling with it. And as you know, the borders have been open here for quite some time. How would you solve the whole immigration crisis? Well, it's a very big problem, and it's one that neither party has solved. And it's been used as a political pawn in this entire process of gaining political power. So it's tough. But to be fair, those are the kinds of questions you have to answer if you want to be president. Now, Trump doesn't have to answer them. Of course, his thing is I'm going to deport them, you know, and he doesn't really have a plan for deportation. It's just, he's just talking. And in my judgment, the media really gives him a pass. He doesn't sit down for these kinds of tough interviews. No Contendo says interviewer acting like the House is going to stay red. Yeah, well, this is the question, and it's interesting. Let's assume the House does stay red. The thing that she pointed to, which I actually liked in her answer, is, hey, she didn't say it this way, but this is the truth. This is what she's saying. This is a political winner for both parties. I mean, coming out against price gouging, what is Democratic or Republican about that? Yeah. It's not a red-blue issue. You should be able to get a coalition on that. You should. Now, whether or not you should and whether or not you will are two different things, but you should be able to say that. That is what she was saying. She said she didn't quite say it in those words. She did say something which I thought was good, which is, hey, I've been on Capitol Hill, and believe me, quietly the conversation is my constituency would like that. So I thought that was a pretty good answer.
Do you think if Trump loses this election, that he'll still somehow be able to pull the strings of Republicans that are sitting in Congress?
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. If Trump loses, you haven't seen the kind of retreat that you're going to see from the Republican Party from Trump. I mean, they thought he was done once after the coup attempt. Remember? You know, Kevin McCarthy on the floor of the House, Mitch McConnell on the floor of the Senate. They were all talking about the fact that Trump was the reason that the January 6th incident happened and that we've had enough of this. Lindsey Graham turned on him. And then when it was clear that America hadn't, I mean, this portion of America that loves him, they all came back. And then they went to Mar-a-Lago, and McCarthy went to Mar-a-Lago to kiss his ring, etc. So there's
always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots.
Okay, and you add a little bit to those percentages, and you could have a guy who wins the presidency again. Before I get to Jefferson Graham, quickly, Tony, Play me the 60 Minutes explanation as to why Trump wasn't there. Didn't I send you that? Not this. It's a... oh, this is the end of her interview where she throws shit. I'll take this too. Yeah, I'll take this too. Go ahead. You have it ready? Whatever you want. I'll take whatever you've got. There you go. This is Kamala Harris on...
You are sitting here with us. The Trump campaign canceled an interview that they had agreed to participate in this broadcast. What do you make of that?
If he is not going to give your viewers the ability to have a meaningful, thoughtful conversation, question and answer with you, then watch his rallies. You're going to hear conversations that are about himself and all of his personal grievances. And what you will not hear is anything about you, the listener. You will not hear about how he's going to try to bring the country together, find common ground. And Bill, that is why I believe in my soul and heart the American people are ready to turn the page.
So there you go. I don't think that's quite true exactly, though. I will say I think he speaks in generalities. Yeah, this is what I want to see, and we'll show this, and then Jefferson Graham. Thank you, Tony. That's the next thing we'll show, because 60 Minutes actually explains why Trump didn't show, why he ducked out. Trump speaks in generalities and says, it's going to be great when I get in. You won't believe how great it is. You won't believe how it'll be great for women. Women won't have any cares anymore. This whole idea, I'll be a friend to women. I'll be a friend to veterans. I'll be a friend to everyone. The economy will be pumping again, even though, as you know, the economy was in real trouble when he left. Again, even pre-COVID, this economy is better than that. But anyway, to the point, he just makes these generalities. You'll get a tax cut. We won't tax your tips. We won't tax your overtime, whatever he may say. So he speaks in the stuff. He just is kind of throwing out little morsels, but there are no specifics. It's all generalities, and it's rah, 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 and mostly it's dumping on the left. So that's really what he does in those rallies. And then it's a lot about his personal grievances. So it's not exclusively about his personal grievances and about him. Now, here's what 60 Minutes said about him not getting on. Go ahead.
It's been a tradition for more than half a century that the major party candidates for president sit down with 60 Minutes in October. In 1968, it was Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. This year, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump accepted our invitation. But unfortunately, last week, Trump canceled. The Trump campaign had told us that the interview would be this past Thursday at Mar-a-Lago. They also asked us whether we would meet 78-year-old Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he was grazed in an assassination attempt. We agreed. On September 9th, Trump's communications director, Stephen Chung, sent a text that read, quote, "I'm working with our advance team to see logistically if Butler would work in addition to the sit-down." Sit-down meaning the interview in Florida. Days later, Chung called to say, quote, "The president said yes." Then, a week ago, Trump backed out. The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Leslie Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that. Trump has said his opponent doesn't do interviews because she can't handle them. He had previously declined another debate with Harris, so tonight may have been the largest audience for the candidates between now and Election Day. Our questions addressed the economy, immigration, reproductive rights, and the wars in the Middle East and Europe. Both campaigns understood this special would go ahead if either candidate backed out.
Good stuff. All right, that's it. I'm running way behind. Now, and I'm seeing it in the chat. Is Mark not going to do any of the questions that made her look bad? I don't know what is Mark glossing over the bad clips, says OCB. No, I'll come back to this, and if I don't get to it today, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm not shying away from anything that the bad clips, as you say. In fact, if you've got a particular bad clip that you feel we should focus on and that I can comment on, please send it to us, themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. I'm really late, though, right now.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And our friend of the show, who's been so patient, and our time now is so limited, he is the former tech writer for USA Today, and on Tuesdays we like to focus on technology. Then David Cay Johnston will join us after the top of the hour. Right now, he is the great Jefferson Graham. Love talking to him.
Hi.
Jeff, my God, is it another one of these Amazon, what do they call them?
Well,
These
before we get to Prime Day, I just quickly want to follow on what you were talking about the Kamala Harris interview on 60 Minutes. And we talk a lot here about cutting the cord and how you don't need cable and you don't need this and you don't need that. But I did get a DVR to record the interview and some other things. And I had it set for 8 o'clock last night, 8 o'clock Pacific time. And I turned on the TV at 6 o'clock and went to YouTube. The interview was there in full. So that's an interesting cutting the cord thing. The interview was there at 6 o'clock. I didn't have to wait till 8. And it was
your point is that more and more, I mean, I think your implied point is that more and more networks and other news organizations and even entertainment companies are realizing that you drop stuff on YouTube and you can reach as big, if not bigger, audiences than you can through mainstream media.
That's right. Look at you, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
Amazon Prime Day, yet again. Here we go again. Yes, get your holiday shopping before Halloween.
When was the last Prime Day? It feels like it was just like a month ago.
I know, it was in the summer.
Okay.
But as always, if you're looking for something to buy, put it in your cart and see if it's on sale. You might save $1. Maybe $5. I mean, it's pretty silly. If you want to buy an Amazon product, though, I mean, it's pretty good. A Kindle that's $150 is $125. A Ring doorbell, which is $100, is $60. A Echo Spot, which is a pretty cool alarm clock speaker, it's normally $80, now it's $45. So I think, but if you want to buy pajamas, you could save $6. And it's silly little things. But if you're looking to buy something, check it out on Amazon. You might save $1 or $2.
You know, there's something out of TikTok that I thought was intriguing. You told me about this countdown clock online.
Yes.
Tell me about what's going on TikTok.
Yes. Did you get it? Okay. So this guy who writes a newsletter put this clock up, and I was like, for real? You're actually having a countdown to the January date where I think it's January. It's either January 19th, where TikTok is supposed to disintegrate. And I called him. I said, "Are you serious about this?" He says, "No, I just wanted to get attention for me," which was me being him. But because there's no way that TikTok is going away. I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now, even though there was a bill that called for it to be dissolved by January 19th. They will come up with a solution. It is now in court. They had a court date in September, and they're waiting upon a ruling. And when they get that ruling, if they don't like it, they'll go to the Supreme Court, and it'll go on and on and on. TikTok ain't going away. It's too popular.
Couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, what they may do is force the sale of TikTok, at least a part of it, and they'll force it such that some huge billionaire guy, I'm thinking of Jared Kushner's brother is one guy. There's a list of guys who could swoop in and get it. And because it's a forced sale, might be able to get it at a huge bargain. So, but couldn't agree with you more. If you're just a TikTok user and you don't care about this stuff, it's not going anywhere. That seems clear. Big news out of our world, YouTube. Tell us about this.
Shorts. The vertical shorts that are really popular that were designed to take on YouTube had a limit of 60 seconds, as Mark
designed
knows.
to take on Instagram, right? You said, yeah.
No,
right.
it's just on YouTube. Yeah, but no, it's to take on TikTok.
Take on TikTok, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, to take on TikTok. Mark knows how challenging it is to make a 60-second short. Sometimes you might want to go 62. Or 65 or 70, and you can't until in a few days, October 15th. They're going to go to 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
That's terrific. Well, it's not, I mean, leave aside me, but you're right. Sometimes it's a real effort to try to squeeze everything into 60 seconds. But one of the things that's good about TikTok is that their clips run longer than just a minute. I like that. And I think I get it. Our attention spans are short, but 60 seconds is just not long enough. So I think it's going to be a net winner for YouTube. And they must have research that supports this move, right?
Yeah, I don't think they needed 3 minutes. I think a minute and a half would have been fine. Just a few extra seconds. But I'll take it. And they're challenging for me to make because everything has to be vertical, and I do everything horizontal. But you get used to it and you figure it out.
Yeah. I think 2 minutes is probably optimal, but not everything has to be 3 minutes. It's just that they're offering that length of time. Cutting the cord. You talk about this DVR, and you opened our conversation with the DVR trying to get the Kamala Harris interview on 60 Minutes. It's interesting to me why. I mean, getting a DVR seems exceedingly
so
old school. Yeah,
I know. I know. So I bought this thing. It's made by Tablo, Tablo. It sells for $100. You plug it. It comes with an antenna. So I got another antenna, plugged it in. It didn't even go into the TV, which I thought was very weird. It did not plug into the TV, but it picks up everything that is on the antenna, which for me was like 170 channels. 170 channels of things you never want to watch. But there are things, beyond the networks and the local TV stations. There's all these digital channels that are running some old stuff. My show Photo Walks is now on Scripps TV, Scripps News, which is one of those over-the-air channels. So that's why I bought it. I wanted to record the whole experience.
I see.
But now I got to record Sunday morning, CBS Sunday Morning, which I've been watching in clip form. I got the whole thing. You could pick it up on other TVs. And there's a whole lot of stuff still good on over-the-air television. And for $100, it's a lot cheaper than going to a cable alternative site like YouTube TV, like Hulu with live TV, like Fubo or Sling. And it works really well. I was really, really pleasantly surprised.
Your show is in all those places, though. You can see your show is, obviously it's on YouTube, but it's also available in a bunch of those places that you just mentioned. So that's kind of cool. If you haven't seen Jeff's show, you should check it out. Photo Walks TV is on YouTube. It seems to be his home platform. Yeah. But then it's spread across the universe digitally and through the analog world as well, as it turns out. Really good stuff. And the Photo Walks TV, there it is. And also, I think it's everything you want is right there on Jefferson's YouTube homepage, Photo Walks TV. Appreciate you stopping through. Our time is short. It's a hot political season. I hope you'll understand, but it is great always to visit with you. Thank you, Jefferson Graham.
Thank you.
All right. Jefferson Graham, everybody. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We have a lot to come. If you have anything that you are at all curious about, and specifically, please send it along. And if you have any questions for our next guest, please do share them. He is so great with fielding any questions that come from the audience. Luis says, GOP science equals Florida being smashed by hurricanes is not climate change. It's the Dems using the Coyotes' Acme weather controlling beam. Love Dr. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, thank you for that, Luis. The conspiracy stuff that is related to disaster relief, we've talked about. The conspiracy stuff related to weather control is even more lunacy. And I know a little something about this. I have a background in meteorology and can speak to it. And it's filled with, again, all the absurdities that all of these conspiracy theories seem to be filled with. But that for a different time. Stephen Ironmonger says, David Cay mentioned soybean subsidies, a result of Trump tariffs. Didn't it socialize soybean farming? I'm quite sure I understand that. Maybe David Cay Johnston won't be able to help me with that. Meaning, because of the subsidies? I mean, if we talk about subsidies being a part of socializing things, we're basically subsidizing most of the businesses, most of the major businesses, from oil to all kinds of agricultural businesses. and beyond. We're subsidizing them in one way or the other, either outright subsidy or through tax cuts, I would think. But no more delay. Can I just bring on David Cay Johnston, not to start a Lilliput and Bien Francisco war. Why is the MT beanie logo worn to the back? I proudly wear mine to the front. Oh, I don't know. I thought the logo is on the front. I don't know. I can't make David Cay Johnston wait anymore. So, but thank you for that. I'll follow up on that if there is time. All right. Wow. I didn't know. I mean,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I feel like it's not really my department, but somehow I suppose it is. This guy's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He is the co-founder of DCReport.org, which continues to be a great place that you should check out for all sorts of information. He's a best-selling author, and when it comes to Trump, he is without peer, and now he's a professor at RIT. How about it for the great David Cay Johnston, everybody?
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir. Wow. So much to talk about. The depths to which Trump and his minions have gone with the disinformation related to these hurricanes and hurricane relief, it strains credulity. It's just absolutely insane. And there are real lives involved here, David.
Yeah. Well, you're being very polite. The assertion by Marjorie Taylor Greene that they, unspecified, but I think we know she's talking about Jewish people, they control the weather and therefore are behind the hurricanes is just a perfect example of the kind of idiots that have been thrown up by the Trump Republican Party. There's another lawmaker who said the other day, I've lived in Florida or wherever it is in the South my whole life. I've never seen a hurricane follow this path. And it was one of the hurricanes, if not Helene, that was coming from sort of Mexico toward the U.S. Happens all the time. And of course, all of this is a way to avoid dealing with the fact that these unbelievably intense storms and the damage they do long-term as well as immediately are the result of denialism about climate disruption. There's a study that came out a couple of days ago in which demographers and epidemiologists went through data following, I think it's 501 major storms. And what they showed is that by following for 15 years, that there's a substantial spike within the damage zone of premature deaths. So, for example, you survive the terrible flooding that damaged your house, but your spouse doesn't. You're probably going to be depressed and otherwise troubled by the loss of your spouse, especially if you're older. And you may not have the money to properly fix up your house. So you're going to live in a house that has mold in it. And lo and behold, instead of your actuarial life expectancy, you die quite a bit earlier. And the number of deaths they estimate per storm of this kind, normally we hear a handful of people died, a few dozen people died. In the case of Helene, so far, a little over 200. But they argue the real death tolls range from 7 to 15,000 per incident, 7 to 10,000 per incident. And we need to recognize that this is a real serious matter if we don't get serious about the level at which we are burning fossil fuels, because the pace of climate disruption is clearly speeding up.
Yeah, the paths, just to start with what you had started with, the paths of these systems hasn't changed. The intensity, as you correctly said, is the thing that has changed. And hurricanes are a transfer of heat energy. It's the greatest transfer of heat energy from one hemisphere to the other that nature has. And so as we've supercooked the oceans and we've supercooked these bodies of water, we have created these monsters. And to your point, David, we tend to, and this is a weird public policy thing, we tend to worry about the cleanup, and we don't worry about, in some way, mitigating the threat. It's an odd thing. I guess that's just...
Well, to be fair, human beings as a group, it's pretty hard to think about the future. When the ancient Greeks pretty much denuded the trees that are in Greece, which was not even then particularly thick with trees, nobody said, oh, wait a minute, we need to preserve those trees for the next generations. That is a relatively new development, that a portion of the American and European populations now embrace this idea that indigenous peoples, of course, long had, that you need to think not about the time you're alive, but about the future generations to come. Industrialism is completely antithetical to that. It's how quickly can we make a profit? And we allow all sorts of externalizing costs. So you make some product, you take something out of the ground that makes you a lot of money, but it pollutes. You leave a factory or grounds that are soaked with toxic materials behind, and you walk off, leaving everybody else with those costs. We need to have better thought through policies about these things. We don't want to discourage people who are going to create and add wealth, but at the same time, you and I shouldn't be stuck with the costs from somebody who, built their 100-room mansion in the year 1900 and then stuck us with millions or billions of dollars in bills because of the mess they left behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the corporate ownership of those toxins and those pollutants, that should be good public policy. And yet, as you suggested, the pace of things and capitalism, I would say, and I'm a capitalist all the way, but I'm just saying that right now we're organized for the profit with, and damn the consequences type thing.
Right. I mean, rules matter. Capitalism only works when you have rules. People say, well, we need a free market. There's no such thing as a free market. All markets have rules. On Wall Street, anywhere else, buying a house, markets have rules. And who writes the rules and how much they address things like avoiding scamsters, limiting damage from misconduct that spills over to others, those are really important to the society as a whole. And keep in mind something I think is very crucial, and I've criticized a number of public figures for this, including some leading economists. There is no such thing as deregulation. There is only new regulation or re-regulation. And the general tenor of this for the last 50 years is that the new regulations take away rights from consumers, weaken the public sphere, and benefit those people who we have the regulations in place to deal with for our safety, for our health, for our general welfare.
Just to put a button on the hurricane stuff, under Project 2025, and I was making this point in the first hour, they would dismantle the National Weather Service and NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. It wouldn't exist. So you would have
we have to get rid of these institutions that help us know that there's death coming in a couple of hours or a couple of days, because after all, that would cost tax dollars, and we can't have that.
Well, I mean, and I wonder, and I presume they would probably privatize all of that. There would be private industry to come in. The whole thing is an effort to privatize, isn't it, David?
Yes. And, I asked my students yesterday morning, and just in passing, I said, now, what's it cost to send a first-class stamp? I said, I don't know, because we bought hundreds of forever stamps several times in the past, and I've lost track. And one of the students said, oh, I think it's $5 a letter now. And I said, yeah, I'm not sure the price. I think it's about 70 cents. But I will tell you that if you go to either of the two big commercial services, UPS, United Parcel Service, UPS, or Federal Express, FedEx, and you want to send a third-day letter over, now it's 73 cents, okay. Yeah. You want to send a letter third-day delivery, which is the slowest they offer. I did it a few days ago. $28
wow.
For what amounts to a first-class letter.
Right.
$28. So privatizing, sure, you can privatize. They won't come to your house every day as the post office does. And if you're a small business somewhere out in the countryside, they're not going to serve you hardly at all. In fact, in many cases, places like UPS have a deal for the final delivery point to be done by the Postal Service because it's a universal service.
And when it comes to weather events where you need constant updates on a changing situation, if you subscribe to some play to pay or pay to play service, you'll get that information, but otherwise you won't. Just in this vein, and then I want to get to the politics of what's happening now, just in terms of the race, as we're so close. But in this vein, your favorite subject, Donald Trump, it just astounds me. His latest thing has been this crypto venture alongside the watches, the Bibles. There's a wild thing with the Bibles, David, where the schools in Oklahoma are going to buy all of these Trump Bibles. I mean, and the sneakers, et cetera. To call it tacky is polite. It's a grift unlike anything I could ever imagine.
Well, remember, this was a guy who claimed to be worth over $10 billion back in 2015. And when he had to file with the government, by my count, he had $1.4 billion. By Forbes's count, it was about 3.4, neither of which were close. And both of mine and Forbes, I think, were vastly inflated because they made assumptions about the value of the Trump name. But, real billionaires, people like Jeff Bezos and Mark Cuban, are not out there hawking the kinds of things that he is. Donald is just always desperate for another injection of cash. And this crypto thing is very troubling. Today's New York Times has a piece with only a one-column head below the fold on the front page of Business, unfortunately, because I think this should have been much more prominently played. But the Donald Trump crypto coin, and remember, Donald for years said crypto's a scam. The people behind it are scamsters. They have a long record of ripping people off, not paying their bills, cheating on their taxes. If you're not a New York Times subscriber, if you just register, you get 10 free articles a month. And I would really encourage people to read this article. It tells you Donald Trump always says, I only hire the best. I'm only involved with the best. Well, these people, they are well-documented scamsters. There's another article my daughter Amy found for me in which one of them describes his ability to sell excrement wrapped in urine and get people to pay for it because they're fools. And in addition, the Times article quotes these scamsters Trump is working with as saying that Barron Trump, a freshman in college, is a visionary on crypto. That screams how much this is just another scam coming. And they're pitching this as a way to reduce the federal debt. I can't imagine what it is they're thinking, but now it's not just Trump running a scam to line his own pockets. He is proposing here that somehow the government become involved in this.
Right. And should he become president, he could very much affect the value of these holdings that he has and that his followers have. Chase Harrow is an online salesman who proudly calls himself a dirtbag of the internet, able to sell anything to anyone. That's in reference to kind of what you were just saying. Zachary Folkman, the other guy who's involved in this, his partners, ran a company called Date Hotter Girls, offering advice under a pseudonym on how to pick up women at bars. And of course, Barron didn't show up even for the rollout, the big announcement. And Harrow and Folkman have a history of jumping from project to project. Together or separately, they've formed at least 17 companies gravitating to the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. Of course, both of those are tax havens. And a lot of these are social media marketing and selling advice on how to get rich quick. So,
these guys are real serious scammers. And this is indicative of Donald. Donald has no judgment. So you flatter Donald, you tell him he's wonderful, he's a genius, and he just eats out of your hand. And so you have a con artist, Donald, being conned by other people and trying now to con the general public.
And the Bible thing is this,
we used to, I've written over my career a number of stories about how somebody tried to rig a government bid. There was a time in California when the Highway Patrol wrote the bids for new highway patrol cars so that only Dodge could get the contract, and the same Sacramento Dodge dealer got the contract year after year until Lou Cannon at the San Jose Mercury exposed this. Like, this is 60 years ago almost. And the contract that's been proposed for the Oklahoma schools to buy these Bibles, which I think is a perfectly improper use of state funds, it requires that the Bible have the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and something else in it.
The
and
Pledge of Allegiance, I think. Yeah.
The what?
Pledge of Allegiance, I believe.
Yeah,
also.
the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
And the only Bible known to have that is the Lee Greenwood Bible that Donald Trump has been hawking and signing as if he's the author, which is, of course, part of his effort to sell to the really gullible that he's God. And, he says, I alone can save you. There's all sorts of material out there that Donald Trump is God's agent. And then, of course, there's some counter material saying that, the Bible warns there'll be an Antichrist. And when he arrived, Christians started embracing him. His name is Donald Trump. But it is indicative of how the people around Trump have lost sight of fundamental principles about the American Constitution and our system and our history of this country being founded to get away from state religion.
Yeah, there's a lot wrapped up in this, not to mention the grift, as you suggest, which was related to the specificity with which they sought bidders for this Bible stuff. So,
yeah,
as you see the state of the race, it seems to be in a kind of a zone where both sides are baked in, both within the margin of error. Certainly the most recent polling would suggest trends in Harris's direction, but they're minuscule. I mean, they're incremental.
Yeah.
I wonder how do you assess things now?
Well, first of all, in the popular vote, she's going to romp compared to Donald. I had said Joe Biden would win by 10 million votes this time around. I think she may well win by 15 million or more votes. But of course, we don't elect by popular vote. This election is about 7 states. And very tiny numbers in those states can matter. 2 of those states, Nevada and Arizona, are next door to California. So if you live in California, what I would encourage you to do is call up people, one of the campaigns of a member of Congress, local Democratic or Progressive Party people, indivisible, move on. And if you can afford to do it, drive over to either Nevada or Arizona to get people to the polls on November 5th. This is all about who turns out to vote in those states. The problem with polls, and I think I've mentioned this before, is that fewer than 1 in 100 people, and in some polls fewer than 1 in 200, who answer the telephone will answer the questions. And so I don't think we have truly random samples of the electorate in these polls. And usually over a long period of time, polls sort of keep their trend lines. We keep popping up with these individual polls that the numbers change significantly from one week to the next. So I think that's further evidence that the technique of polling in this election and in the era of cell telephones is not particularly reliable. It seems to be a problem bigger, I think, than the problem that arose in 1948, where they started doing polls by telephone numbers. And the numbers showed the Republicans were much stronger than turned out to be the case when the ballots were counted, because people who had higher incomes tended to have phones, and people who had lower incomes and voted for Democrats didn't. That's the famous Dewey beats Truman headline in the Chicago Tribune. So the concern, I think, is entirely the Electoral College. And once we get past this election, I hope that we start a serious discussion about either removing the Electoral College or altering it in some way. For example, just because California only has 2 senators and Wyoming has 2, even though California has about 75 or 80 times the population, that doesn't mean the Electoral College, we can't say that California gets 6 electoral votes for the Senate side, or 8 or whatever. Otherwise, in the long run, we're going to end up with a country run based on the rural states.
Sure.
And that's not where the wealth is created. It's not where the intellectual development is taking place. It is not where the populations live.
Yeah, the Electoral College has consistently let down the voice of the people, but it clearly benefits so many people who are on the right. I'm talking about politically. That it's the same thinking as to Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia and places that should have a vote in Congress but don't for political reasons. You know, David, I just feel like this is an intractable thing. Although on the Electoral College issue, there was a real effort and is an ongoing real effort to change that, and it's much closer than people think. In other words, it's not like, oh, we have to introduce a bill into Congress. Isn't that right? I mean, there's an ongoing.
No,
effort.
it's a constitutional. This is a constitutional amendment question, but just keep in mind the last 8 elections, the Democrat won the popular vote, but that didn't mean the Democrat got in the White House, and that tells you that the system is not producing what the popular will wants in these elections. The only Republican who's won a majority was George W. Bush in 2004. Otherwise, the Republicans who became president were minority winners.
Tony, can you play for David Cay Johnston the latest Kamala Harris ad? I just wanted to get his thought on it. Do you have it? I sent you the newest ones just dropped in the last couple of yesterday, actually. The newest couple of Kamala Harris ads dropped yesterday. And here is one of them, and I'm just wanting to get your thought on it. Here we go.
I worked in the Trump administration.
Never in a million years did I ever think that I'd be working in the White House with a president that didn't care about the American people.
He would suggest not giving disaster relief to states that hadn't voted for him.
I remember one time after a wildfire in California, he wouldn't send relief because it was a Democratic state. So we went as far as looking up how many votes he got in those impacted areas to show him these are people who voted for you. This isn't normal. The job of the president is to protect Americans, regardless of politics.
If Trump's elected again, there'll be no one to stop his worst instincts. You'll have yes men help him implement Project 2025's agenda. Unchecked power, no guardrails.
They will be serving one man. I am voting for Kamala Harris because she will put the safety and security of every American first, whether they voted for her or not.
This is part of this effort, David, to showcase those who worked with the Trump administration or voted Republican and who have now come across. I'm wondering if you can give me a thought or two.
Well, you know, they're very nicely professionally produced ads, but frankly, I think you get far more bang for your buck if they build up even more the ground games in the 7 states that are in play. Nothing works better than knocking on doors. There have been people elected to Congress in 2 districts I've lived in my life. When I lived in Sunnyvale by San Jose and when I lived in East Lansing, Michigan, where a nobody ever heard of spent a whole year knocking on doors in their congressional district, and they got elected. And I think that's what matters here is getting people out on election day. The political science research that I've seen indicates that ads shift about 0.3% of voters. That can be enough in a close election to shift things, but far more cost and same old approach instead of knocking on doors. And Harris has the benefit of how much the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision and Donald Trump's boasting until recently about how he got rid of Roe versus Wade, got rid of the Roe decision, to turn out very motivated people to support her campaign. I have a piece that will be up before we talk next week about the significance of what it will mean should Donald Trump win the Electoral College, and what you can almost what is highly likely to happen and what may happen, and all of it's bad for the economy, for your liberty, for people elsewhere in the world who don't want to live under the boot of the Kremlin, Beijing, other dictatorial regimes who Donald thinks are just great.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he relates Viktor Orban in some kind of positive framing during the debate was just astounding to me. And so I can't wait to read that piece. And just apropos of the Kremlin and Putin, I wanted to finish up by asking you about two things. First, your comment on the breaking news, which comes out of Bob Woodward's new book, which is that apparently Trump sent Putin these COVID tests. This is in the very early days of COVID, when the tests were like they were a piece of gold, like a nugget of gold, and he sent and subsequently sent them to Putin, and then subsequently had these ongoing conversations with Putin. There are some reports, and I thought in the Woodward book, I'll have to see, there were almost daily conversations he was having with Putin. I wanted to get your thought on that, and then to the war.
Well, first of all, don't measure this by the hard-to-find nature of this and the cost. I mean, sending a handful, even 100 tests to Vladimir Putin could be a smart strategy. Per se, we shouldn't question the judgment of a president doing something like that because it could have other benefits that are not obvious to us. That said, I wonder, A, why Woodward didn't report this in one of his previous books, particularly since he was the one who showed that Donald knew perfectly well COVID was going to kill huge numbers of people and said the opposite in public. And, essentially Donald Trump effectively killed 1 million Americans by his mishandling of the COVID pandemic. Secondly, though, Woodward makes this point that Putin and Trump were, and I've not read the book, I've only read news reports about it, but that they were talking constantly, several times a week. That's very troubling, especially given that Trump had the two infamous meetings, one where the only person with him was the U.S. translator, and he tore up her notes, which is arguably a prosecutable felony. And secondly, he went completely alone to meet with Putin for hours. So we have no idea what took place in these meetings, but you can be sure that Russian intelligence mined everything Trump did from, when he smiled and when he frowned, to understand how to manipulate Trump as president. We want presidents talking to foreign leaders. We want people like General Milley, when he was head of the Joint Chiefs, to get on the phone and reassure military leaders elsewhere in the world about what's happening, even though Trump attacked that and said it was traitorous. But the patterns of things, those we need to pay very close attention to. And this new Woodward material is very disturbing. And so why did Woodward decide that this didn't go in his earlier book? Woodward is not a guy who sits around going, ooh, how much more money can I get for this? He's got more money than he knows what to do with. And I hope somebody asks him, why did you leave this out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, because it's, as you say, it would have dovetailed so well with some of the other stuff, the revelations around COVID from his other book.
I do think it's incredibly important, though, for us to pay attention to, had we followed the science on COVID as South Korea did, which had its first case the same day we did. And you look at the death rates from the countries that followed the science, and then you adjust for our population, and close to 1 million people died because of Donald Trump's incompetence and, more importantly, his lying to the public. When he knew better, he'd been told better. He's getting, Rolls-Royce level care because he's the president of the United States, and people are dying. And I don't think we should let him off the hook for this. It is the most abominable thing. More people died because of Donald Trump's mismanagement of the COVID pandemic, starting with his firing the whole pandemic team on the national security team in the White House that Barack Obama had put there to have very early intelligence, then died in World War II, all the wars since the Civil War. That's just a horrible thing to contemplate.
Sure. Yeah. And it's interesting. You remind me of the lies he told when he got COVID, because I always hear about, well, Trump's authentic. He may be this gross guy who says inappropriate things, but he's speaking his mind and he's authentic. he's lying constantly, and that was one of the big lies around COVID. When he got it, it was just it was.
I mean,
all
Donald lies as easily as you and I breathe. It's just who he is, and people need to recognize that, and they need to recognize that he doesn't know anything. I mean, the most scary part about him is he doesn't know anything. I mean, he asserted nobody could see this pandemic coming. Are you kidding? Epidemiologists, people who paid any attention have known this was coming for a long, long time. There will be more pandemics. It's part of the human condition. And as soon as we got jetliners, it is absolutely surprising it took until 2020 to get a really serious global pandemic, because what's better for a virus that's going to kill you than a jetliner?
Right, exactly, to get it worldwide. And as you say, one of the pieces of evidence for that is the fact that there was a team in place and a playbook in place as to how to handle an oncoming pandemic. Right. And he threw it all away because it had Obama's name on it. Okay, quickly to Russia. Again, to this Russia-Ukraine back and forth. You had noted to me that Russia is running out of enough cash and foreign cash, and they've turned to barter instead.
The Russians have a Russian business has a deal with Pakistan to swap Pakistani oranges and potatoes for Russian lentils and some other foodstuff. I mean, first of all, the idea that Russia has to import potatoes is extraordinary because they're a huge potato producer, but they don't have any cash to clear transactions. That tells you that the sanctions that the Biden administration and our allies have put in place, sanctions are usually, they're just cosmetic. These are not cosmetic. These are having a real impact on the Russian economy. The Russians have been bringing out World War II era tanks and other equipment that was in mothballs. You know, they pack it in grease. We have equipment from World War II the same way. They're running through that. They don't have money to import parts that they need to build new tanks and other equipment. And what that says to me, plus the Ukrainians have done some brilliant maneuvers recently. They've taken down another AWACS type air surveillance plane that the Russians are down. I think to 3 of them now, maybe 4, 3 in Russia, and there's one they keep in Syria. The military strategy of the Ukrainians, it's going to be studied for as long as we study warfare as human beings. It's been remarkable. And Russia is reduced to bartering for goods. I'm sorry, we've had coinage for at least 2,500 years, and they don't have any coin. They're down to bartering. It's a highly inefficient system, and it tells you that keeping the pressure on Putin will have benefits. And if there's anything I think Kamala Harris has been clear about in foreign relations, there are 2 things, actually. One is she will be even tougher with Putin on the invasion of Ukraine. She's going to press to get this over with, which means you have to make the Russians give up, which is probably the end of Putin's regime, his dictatorial regime. And secondly, she's made it pretty clear that she will be much tougher on Netanyahu because 40,000 dead Palestinians, over 1,400 dead Israelis is just not a proportional response. And now that you see Netanyahu invading Lebanon and doing the same thing, demolishing civilian buildings, I think it's very clear what Netanyahu's up to. And she's going to want to avoid addressing this in the campaign because I don't think there's any upside to this. But I think
it's interesting, though, David, because she's paying tougher. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted on that point. I wanted to say that she's being in Michigan. She's in, I'll put it this way, there's some political headwinds associated with the Arab community in Michigan for her. Yeah. So she's paying a political price in Michigan, even though relative to Trump, she is, as you suggested, likely going to be much tougher on the government of Israel.
Yeah, I listened to an NPR report the other day from Dearborn, which is probably the most concentrated Muslim population in America, certainly very close to it. And a number of speakers who are going to vote for Trump because he says he'll put an end to the war. There's no evidence Donald has any capacity to do that whatsoever. And given his statements about Benjamin Netanyahu, I think he'd take we haven't put handcuffs on him, but we put some restrictions on things for Netanyahu. There's no reason at all to think that he would be any better for Palestinians, for Arabs living in Lebanon than Kamala. And one of the things that tells me is that there's a lot of inchoate political thought in America. And there's a great deal of, if it isn't perfect, then I'm against it. You never want perfect to be the enemy of the good, because if you make perfect the enemy of the good, you're really going for the bad.
Yeah, that's so well said. And that it's so applicable in this particular moment in politics. When is your column dropping, the new one that you mentioned? Where you
I don't know. I got to finish writing it, but I'm hoping
Okay.
in a day or two. But it's going to say some things some people may think are kind of out there, but they're things we need to be thinking about. I regret that when the Sandy Hook shooting occurred, which was 2010. I wrote a column for whoever I was on contract with at the time that if a shooter showed up and killed an entire school, everybody there, all the classes, all the teachers, that gun laws wouldn't change. And my wife persuaded me that I shouldn't publish that piece. This one, now I'm publishing this piece because I think people need to understand what is likely to happen and what absolutely can happen if Donald Trump gets back into office. And thank you to Justin. 2012 was Sandy Hook, 2012. So I was with Reuters at the time.
And it'll be a DC report. Is that just to double check?
No, the New Republic. I'm doing this
New
for
Republic.
The New Republic.
Okay, at New Republic. Good stuff. David, love your takes. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We'll talk next Tuesday. David Cay Johnston.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. Loving it, loving it. I lost completely track of the time. Maybe it's a good idea to get that, get those clocks with the multiple time zones. I like that, Tony. Tony has found the moment at which Donald Trump walked out of the Leslie Stahl interview when it was the last time he sat down with 60 Minutes. Go ahead, Tony. Play a little bit of that. This is a little...
Didn't want to have this kind of angry...
Of course you did.
No, I didn't.
Of course you did.
No, I didn't.
Well, then you brought up a lot of subjects that
Well, I said
were
I'm going to ask you
inappropriately brought
tough
up.
questions.
They were inappropriately
But-
brought up right from the beginning. No, your first question was, this is going to be tough questions.
Why?
You don't ask Joe Biden. I saw your interview with Joe, the interview with Joe Biden.
I never did a Joe
It was
Biden
a joke.
interview.
The interview, 60 Minutes. I see Joe Biden giving softball after softball. I've seen all of his interviews. He's never been asked a question that's hard.
Okay, but forget him for a minute.
No, but you
You're
start
president,
with me.
You're president. And
Excuse me, Leslie, you started with me. Your first statement was, are you ready for tough questions?
Are you?
That's no way to talk. It's no way to talk.
Leslie, one second.
At this point, one of our producers interrupted to advise about the time remaining in the interview.
I think we have enough of an interview here, Hope. Okay, that's enough. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go meet for 2 seconds, okay? Thanks. I'll see you in a little while. Thanks.
Be careful.
What's great about that is it reminds me that he never really did sit down for a 60 Minutes interview. He sat down for it, but it never really happened. I'd forgotten that. Thank you, Tony. Good grab, and I didn't even ask for it. Tony just did that on his own.
Imagine being upset because they said, "Are you ready for tough questions?"
Yeah, I thought
that's what touches you off.
I thought that was actually her being kind of warming him up. You know what I mean? You ready for tough questions? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, hey, buddy. You know, I thought it was that familiarity that she was trying to play off of. I was surprised that it caused it.
Doesn't it make him seem unreasonable?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
someone who flies off the handle at just random things.
Well,
I
he
don't know.
likes interviewers who like him, and he's the one, of course, who favors softball situations. That's why he shows up on Fox and Friends. I just went down the whole list for you. You'll see, and you'll usually hear him because he calls into Fox and Friends, and they'll give him a wide berth, and he'll get his normal rub down, and he'll just, filibuster on Fox and Friends, okay? Then he may show up on Jesse Waters, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, all these other places, and any other place in which he has a friendly port. That's what he does. But anyway, I don't want to beat up on Trump all the time, but it just is getting to the point where you're going, hey, let's hold both candidates to the same standard. That's kind of where I am on it. Kamala has the lead from listener Ernie. I got this. Oh, wait. First, Tess Downing. Tess, we've learned so much about. She's really been a big part of the show today. Tess says, please ask David Cay Johnston about the Trump support from Afrikaners, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, David Sachs, etc. Heard disturbing story on this on the readout yesterday. White supremacy, scary, rich men. Well, Tony, why am I just seeing this now? Or is it, who do I blame for me not being able to ask David Cay Johnston about this right now?
I'll take a picture of it, and we'll ask him next week.
I don't understand.
I have a million pictures from the show
producing
today.
this thing has no idea what they're doing.
That Tess Downey, our beloved Tess Downey now, could write in, have a question for David Cay Johnston, have it sitting there, and now I've just said goodbye to David Cay Johnston. It doesn't make any sense.
Why are you yelling?
I'm not yelling. I'm just making the point that it should have been done in a more timely way. So, Kim, I'm counting on you to make sure that we get that into David Cay Johnston the next time. Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA, with a super chat. 20 years ago, I read a great book called Perfectly Legal and really enjoyed it. Today, I was looking through my books and realized who the author is. It's David Cay Johnston. David, thank you for your books. Wow.
Nice.
That's really cool, Stan Pollock, CPA. Love that stuff. And I also got
I've received a lot of positive letters.
I got a letter from listener Ernie early this morning. You know, the Mark Thompson Show machine never sleeps. During the overnight hours, I'm calling. I'm searching. I'm grabbing. I'm attaching, I'm sending, I'm emailing, I'm posting, I'm texting.
Why are you yelling?
It never stops, the machine. And Ernie, in the wee hours, sent me this story. It's from Fortune magazine, and you're going to like it if you're one of the Kamala Harris supporters. Harris holds a 66 electoral vote lead over Donald Trump.
What?
According to Fortune. And this is calculated by a prominent scientist, data scientist Thomas Miller. He's crafted a model for forecasting the 2024 presidential election.
And this is their new hoax.
All right,
I'm
it may
afraid
be.
to believe things like that because then you start to get your hopes up, you know?
Supposedly, it is far more reliable than the polling that's constantly cited in the media as the best guide for the outcome on November 5th. This is done by data scientist Thomas Miller in conjunction with Dr. Emil Schulthausen. Yeah, the third. And the two of them have come up with this. He's at Northwestern University, Thomas Miller, and he deploys a framework based on the betting odds set by folks wagering their dollars, not on the candidate they intend to vote for, but on the candidate they expect to win. They have been following Miller's predictions during the 2020 White House contest, the Georgia Senate races, and he's been incredibly accurate. And he thinks at the end of it all, when the dust settles, Kamala Harris will have 66 electoral votes more than Donald Trump, and she will ascend to the presidency. So I
Who is having that conversation?
Well, I just told you who's having it. The doctor and the other doctor. So 2 sources. 2 hurricanes in one per month. Will the GOP say hashtag climate change, says no contendo. Yeah, it's a resistant crew. How can the GOP keep the House with RNC funneling all the money? I don't know that the GOP will keep the House, but it's conceivable. It looks, the mainstream thinking is that the RNC, or rather the Republicans, will take the Senate and they'll lose the House. That's the way it looks to be going down. The Senate is a razor-thin margin, as you know, and we've talked about on this show. Michael KJ, GOP actually wants to privatize USPS. Yes, there's no question that, I don't know what the Michael is. I assume that that's somebody in the chat. But anyway, GOP actually wants to privatize the USPS. No Contendo says, the GOP wants to privatize everything. That's part of the game. They want to privatize the USPS. That's something they've been very aggressive about. They'd like to privatize the way in which Social Security benefits are paid. They'd like you to be able to invest your own Social Security retirement, and by so doing, you'll be feeding a lot of big banks and Wall Street interests, and that's not even the beginning. The military, which is traditionally thought of as an institution far too big to be privatized, they want to privatize large parts of it. And they have privatized large parts of it under prior administrations. Under the Bush administration, they privatized part of the military through Blackwater and Eric Prince. And the same is true, and Prince hovering around the last Trump administration and did successfully gain some government contracts. So I think there's chapter and verse on this. There's no question that the privatization of many aspects of government is part of the agenda of Project 2025 and of the GOP generally. You could flush 2025. It's just, as I say, it's predated Project 2025. Kamala Harris will be found to have won the 2024 election several years after the SCOTUS appointed Trump around about 2027. Yeah, so there's that. The fact that essentially, regardless of the outcome, that Trump will be awarded the presidency in the same way that George Bush was awarded the presidency, the younger George Bush. So anything else in the way of super chats? Mama to Three Boys says, by the way, this isn't a super chat, but we'll read it nonetheless. Garvey, I guess that is Steve Garvey, has bought a lot of airtime on Spanish language radio. His ads run at least once every hour. Yeah, pero no me importa, okay? Or however you say it. No es importante, okay? It doesn't matter because there's no way Steve Garvey is winning the Senate seat in California. There just isn't any way it would happen. But he can buy all the ads he wants. Fun exercise. We've had him on this show. Likable guy, but he's not winning the Senate seat in California. Hola, I love as long as we're talking Espanol. Hola, MT, we are watching you en vivo, live from our hotel room in Cordoba, Spain. Wow.
Nice.
I love that. Now, Cordoba, you should check this, although most of what I say is completely 100% accurate.
Google it.
Yes, Google it anyway. I believe Cordoba is one of those big, historically I'm talking about, not anymore, because I think it's really fallen out of favor and it's good. There's a beautiful shot of Cordoba. Wow. Nice
Thanks,
job, Tony.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
It's a bull, I think it's got famous for bullfighting.
It looks like a fairy tale, doesn't it?
It really does. Those are just beautiful shots. Yeah. 9:52 p.m. in Cordoba, Spain, says Karen. Of course, we'd have that if we had those clocks that we're going to get. Oh, look at this. Now, this is in Cordoba. They have an immense church, but the church is made up of all of now this, I hope this is right, but I think this is right, made up of all these different kinds of architecture influences. Part of those influences, I believe, is Moorish, and this relates to that. I think it's it's like visually spectacular and architecturally spectacular. But you really need to go. Now I'm not sure of that.
Google it. Incredible. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, there is somebody else says Moorish influence. There you go. All right, I'll take my, thank you. But wow, good for you. Do they still have bullfighting? I don't know. They might. That's a good question for our friends who are there to find out. Best architecture the Spanish Inquisition can buy. Well, it was not a good period for, The Moors ruled Spain until 700 AD, says Karen. There you go. It was the good old days, really, with the Moors, wasn't it? The word awesome applies. Yeah, Cordoba, there they go. They advertise the...
No, there's the bullfights.
The bullfights. The bullfights are,
Awful.
Awful, horrifying, terrible. Yeah. I put them up there with all the other animal cruelty that is exploitated. But when it's for entertainment purposes, the suffering and the battle, and then it feels a little more like SeaWorld-ish, where you have animals performing for you, but it has this added thing where the animal dies. Of course, as you know, with swords, they hit the animal, they wound the animal, essentially mortally wound the animal ahead of time. So that by the time the battle is going on, by the time that there is actually a bull fight, the bull's ability to fight is immensely compromised. So, good times, everybody. Really, really good times. Glad. But Cordoba is beautiful, and they're not there to see the bullfights. Look at how pretty that place is. Wow.
That looks magic. Mm.
Delwood Kelp, noting the Chrysler Cordoba, a favorite of Fernando Montalban. Fine Corinthian leather. That's right. It's a callback for the older boys and girls. So good stuff.
The Mark Thompson Show.
What is the... I've decided I'm going to get those clocks. I'm going to get the clocks behind me with the different time zones. I really am. Yeah, something like that.
Can't we just have one like on the screen?
No, we cannot.
Because you won't be able to see them behind you.
Well, there's
they need to be like up on the black part on the screen.
I don't expect Kim to get this, Tony, so I'll address this to you.
So
but
what? All see them. Rude.
You know Tony, because you're a YouTuber. The thing that you want is you want your show to have an evergreen quality, right? So identifying it with clock, I think, all the time might not work for you. Am I wrong about that, Tony? What do you think? You're allowed to disagree with me in this one instance. You're allowed.
It might be in the background enough that really won't be able to see it.
Yeah,
but
that's
also
what Kim's saying.
If
She's
it's
saying
glass, it'll reflect your lights.
So you don't like the idea?
No, we have to worry about lights reflecting and then, having problems with that.
Okay, but do you like the idea or not?
Now have that black space
behind you. I'm like Bill Whitaker, and you're like Kamala Harris. Yes, but sir, the question was, do you like the idea of putting the clocks
fit to your, to your right there. There's that big gap of black. We could fill it up with clocks.
But aside from the visuals, do you like the idea of multiple clocks there? Do you understand my point about the show sort of not being on a time kind of? You understand my issue? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you like it?
It wouldn't look bad.
All right.
Thanks, Tony.
Well, there you go. It wouldn't look bad. So, and Kim likes it. Okay. Well, Kim will just do anything to disagree with me. She doesn't, if I didn't like. Dillette says, I'm with Mark on this one. Thank you, Dillette. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to take a meeting on it. I can see we'll have to take... in fact, you know what? I'm going to take a meeting right now with Mr. Predicto. Mr. Predicto, will the show get clocks of any kind going behind me? Mr. Predicto, I ask you.
I would not count on it.
All right. Well, Mr. Predicto feels we may not get it. Maybe wear 5 watches, says James Watson. Very good idea.
Maybe we can get you some Trump watches.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Fun.
That's not fake. That's real.
I'd love it. Wow. There's the Chrysler Cordoba with Ricardo Montalban. I'm looking at Flavor. Just wear one big one like Flavor Flav.
Exactly.
Girl, you just woo.
I love that idea. Yeah. Just a big clock. Wear that clock. Flavor Flav is banning this show. Not enough clocks. Exactly. Good stuff. Well, I'll tell you, we've done a lot today. I had some additional... Did I have anything else that I wanted to get to before we move on, or are we good? I'm particularly talking to you, Tony, because I sent you a bunch of stuff.
I think we went through everything. The 60 Minutes, the ads, we did.
Okay, good.
Hurricane stuff.
The cost of the Mega Million ticket is more than doubling.
That was in my newscast. Yeah,
in
that's
April
crazy.
2025. I know we didn't do your news, so I'm just grabbing stuff from your news. From $2 to $5. Wow.
Right.
It's going to be harder and harder to make Mega Millions. They're saying it's going to be a better odds of winning. Is that what they're saying, Kim?
Yeah, they're saying that it'll hit, like the jackpots will go up because they'll have more money in the pot. And so it'll, the jackpots will be bigger and that you'll win more, because now if you buy a $2 ticket, you can win $2 back,
Right.
But now it won't be that you'll break even. It'll always be that you'll win more than you paid. So all the jackpots will be bigger than $5.
Man.
I don't know. But it'll cost you $5.
Yeah,
that can get to be pretty expensive.
I was going to say that's a higher price point that people are going to have trouble with. What about it, Tony?
It's my odds are better than zero from zero. For winning
Well,
the
if you're going to
lottery,
look at it that way.
Larger starting jackpots, faster growing jackpots, and no break-even prizes.
Because no one buys till it gets a high enough number anyway. That's when people that's when it starts going up astronomically, is when everyone's like, oh, it's a high value anyway. So they just want to start at that higher value, whatever.
Right.
Who on this show plays the lottery? I will tell you that, first of all, we should have done a poll today, and we didn't do it. And I'm really, who can I blame for that? I think I may have to blame myself.
I think you should blame yourself as a good one.
Well, of course you think that.
Yeah.
All right.
I blame you.
It probably is my fault on some level. We said we were going to do a poll, and then we didn't do one. Mega Millions lottery is more than doubling the price of a ticket to $5. Yeah. But in this crew, 2 people don't play the lottery. 1 person does. Who's the 1 person who plays the lottery on this show? 2 people don't play it. 1 person does play it. Who is the 1 person on this show that plays the lottery? Let's finish up with this. You have Kim. You have Albert. You have Tony. You have myself. Who is the 1 person who does play it? I'm seeing Kim, says Randy. Mark, says Delette. Motorex, says Kim. Albert, Kim, Mark. Albert, Kim, Mark. Finally, Tony. I believe the truth is, and I'll ask, there it is.
That's the jackpots right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Huge jackpots swelling, making someone who plays so very wealthy. They probably wouldn't have to show up and do this show anymore if all they care about is the money. Kim, I ask you, do you play the lottery?
I do play the lottery when the jackpot gets big enough, but not with regularity.
Kim
but I do.
Plays the lottery.
Yeah.
Who plays the lottery? Mark. I let it. Everybody thinks I'm the gambler, but it is Kim who is the gambler.
You're the poker player.
The rest of us don't play.
I only play it when it's approaching $1 billion. Then I'll go in there.
I get it. But look, the other thing is that you somehow feel as though you need to explain and apologize for playing it. You don't. There's nothing wrong with it.
It's not like I'm wasting money every day. Maybe once every 6 months.
If you're wasting it, then there's no need to do it. I mean, I just think all I'm trying to say is, Kim, you don't need to explain. You're so paranoid about it. You're so defensive about it.
Well, I don't want you to think that I'm standing in 7-Eleven with a cigarette hanging out of my mouth and a wad of $1 bills in my hand.
What?
Oh, I love that. I love that.
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
I am loving it. All right. Well, you can find more Kim and more of her explaining why she plays the lottery on the After Party Live, everybody.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Channel is an entire channel where they talk about odd stories and cool stuff, and hope you'll enjoy that. We come to San Francisco. It is next week for the big thing at Fort Mason. It is the fall party. We'll give you more on that. That's a fall show is what it's called, but it's going to be a big party. And
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Johnson Show. Bye-bye.
We'll give you ways there. Tony's showing it to you now that you can get tickets and using our discount code MARK, M-A-R-K. Remember, all capital letters. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.